Have you ever stumbled across a story online that hits you so hard it doesn't even feel like just some random post? Today I was scrolling through Reddit and found a few stories like that. Way too real, way too creepy to ignore. I've got a feeling you're going to want to hear these. So, no more waiting, let's dive right in.
Story 1.
When I was a kid, our family had a British shorthair named Charlie. He was mean to everyone but me. He was basically my cat. He used to roam around outdoors, but one day, he never came back. I cried for days and went out looking for Charlie with my dad, but we never found him. I'm 27 now, and I've been living with my boyfriend for 3 years. When we first moved in, we had a cat in our neighborhood who used to sniff around the bins. We took to calling him Trash Cat, before just calling him Trashy. One time, a few kids walking to school kicked rocks at Trashy. One hit him right in the face. Trashy was a tough, stray cat, so he just ran at the teenagers and scratched one of the boys. The boy took his backpack off and started swinging. That's when I stepped in. I shouted at the kids like a grouchy old man. Trashy had run away during this. That's one thing we learned about him. He was very skittish when it came to noises. One morning, Trashy was watching me from the front gate. I was leaving for work, so I knelt down to give him a quick pat, and he rolled onto his side. The next day, he was on our doorstep, so my boyfriend got the idea to leave a bowl of dry food and water for him. Trashy would eat and drink there every day. At some point, he just appeared inside our house, but we didn't make him leave. We loved him already. Trashy continued to roam outside. He would always be an outdoor cat at heart. He would sometimes leave for multiple days, and I would be distraught. He'll come back. My boyfriend, Jason, reassured me. If not for us, for the food. I got used to it. I would open the door to leave for work, and Trashy would be sitting there patiently. We eventually got a dog door for him to come and go as he pleases. One day, we woke up to find patches of water around the house, and Trashy was soaking wet. He shivered, and we got a towel to dry him, but he wouldn't let us go near. Did it rain last night? I asked Jason. No, the Bronsons have a pool. Maybe he got in? I was scared Trashy might drown. I'd never seen him swim before. So we got rid of the dog door, thinking that would solve our problems. But we kept finding him wet and leaving puddles around the house. Every morning, Trashy would dash outside and only return when he was hungry. Eventually, we stopped letting him out altogether, which only made him more anxious. We would find him wet, shivering, and cold, hiding on the second floor of our house. We'll set up a GoPro, Jason suggested. We bought the cheapest GoPro we could find and attached it to Trashy's collar. At night, we turned it on, and the recordings were saved directly to my PC. After a few uneventful nights, we watched the footage. Trashy simply roamed around the house, jumped onto the kitchen bench top, which he wasn't allowed to do, or slept. I started to feel relieved. Maybe it was just a temporary phase. However, one night, I awoke to Trashy yowling and the sound of splashing water. My boyfriend was at his apartment that night, and though I was afraid to go downstairs alone, I couldn't let Trashy get hurt. I ran downstairs, flicking on every light, and searched every room but couldn't find him. The yowling and splashing suddenly stopped. Then I heard something running upstairs. I held my breath and approached the staircase, calling softly, "Trashy?" Trashy poked his head around the corner. He was drenched again, and so was the camera. I logged onto my computer and found the latest recording before the camera had died. It was disorientating to watch the world from a cat's perspective. The house looked completely different, and I had trouble following where he was. While I was skipping through the video, I came across a scene that didn't make sense. Trashy was in a dark room with a blue light and swimming in some kind of water. I dragged the recording back 2 minutes and hit play. Trashy approached the grandfather clock that came with the house. I thought he was going to walk right past it, but instead he slipped through a paper-thin gap. Behind the clock was a hole in the wall that led to a thin staircase. Trashy trotted down and stopped at the last step. There was a small square room flooded with water. Trashy was staring at the surface. All of a sudden there was splashing, and Trashy fell in the water, yowling. He managed to climb out and ran halfway up the stairs before turning back and staring at the water for a long time, before running up to the second floor where I found him. I called Jason and had him come over immediately. Does that mean you could advertise it as a 3-bedroom house? He asked. I'm not in the mood for jokes. Together, we slid the grandfather clock to the side. There were already scratch marks on the hardwood floor. The hole, funnily enough, was about the size of a dog door. There's no way I'd fit inside. Jason said. I might. We didn't test that theory. Since Trashy could slip through the gap, we boarded up the hole with a large wood chopping board and a 3-liter jug of water. It was more weight than Trashy could nudge out of the way. Jason slept with me that night. We had Trashy in the room with us, and the door closed. Later during the night, I woke up to use the in-soot bathroom and found my bedroom door wide open. Jason, get the fuck up, I whispered. Jason groggily rolled over. What is it, babe? The door, I replied. We sat in bed, both confused since neither of us had opened it. Suddenly, we heard splashing and Trashy yowling louder than ever before. Come on, I urged Jason. We rushed downstairs to the living room. The bucket had been pushed over, spilling water on the floor. In that moment, all I cared about was saving Trashy. Trashy, I called, but the splashing continued. I lay on the floor and carefully slipped one arm through the hole, shuffling my body until I was inside. The hole opened up to a narrow stone staircase. I crept down, guided only by touch, until I reached the final step. Before me was the square room with its flashing blue emergency light and filled with water. I couldn't tell how deep it was, but I could still hear the splashing. Trashy, come here, I called again. Rial, Trashy cried. In the dim, pulsating light, I could just make out Trashy's frail silhouette as he desperately flailed his front paws, but he didn't move. He was stuck on something. I dropped into the water and swam towards him. The water was a swirling mix of black and blue. My heart hammered in my ears as I thrashed about. I reached out and closed my trembling hand around Trashy's soaked fur. Then I felt it, a sudden tug. I reached behind to remove what Trashy was caught on, and it grabbed me. A cold, bony hand. I tore my hand back and grabbed Trashy, kicking my legs wildly. I swam back to the stairs, screaming for Jason. Babe, what's happening? Babe, Jason shouted. There's someone in here. I yelled. I managed to get out of the water. Trashy, agitated and scratching me, broke free from my grip and slipped back out through the hole. I crawled after him. Pull me through. I emerged, and together we moved the grandfather clock back in front of the hole. 20 minutes later, the police arrived. They borrowed a hammer from our toolbox and bashed in the wall until it was large enough for one Officer Matthews to duck through. He went inside and came back out. It looks like you've got a little flooding, but the room's empty. Are you sure this is the only way out? He asked. What are you on about? It's as deep as a swimming pool, I argued. Matthews just shrugged. It's dark, and you were scared. You were probably imagining things. Later, I organized for contractors to come out. They drained the water and sealed the wall off. We haven't had any more incidents with Trashy since, but on some nights, I can still hear water splashing. I thought more and more about what Matthews had asked me. Are you sure this is the only way out?
Story 2.
You ever have one of those moments where you look back and think, that was the point where I should have turned around? I think about that a lot now. Omar, Ryan, and I were supposed to have a once-in-a-lifetime trip. One final adventure before Omar got married and settled down. No wild bachelor parties. No drunken chaos in some city nightclub. Omar wanted something different. A real experience. So, we wrote down a bunch of dream destinations, tossed them into a hat, and let fate decide. Banff, Canada. None of us had ever been to Canada before, let alone the rugged wilderness of the Rockies. It was the perfect mix of adventure and relaxation. Hiking, breathtaking views, fresh air, and, most importantly, no distractions. Just us and nature. I can't even remember now if it was Omar or Ryan who pulled that piece of paper out of the hat, but I do remember the feeling that settled in my gut as soon as we arrived. The initial excitement was there, off course, but something else polluted that joyous feeling. Like an oil slick on a beautiful shoreline. Like we weren't supposed to be there. At first, I chalked it up to the eerie quiet of the place. Banff is stunning, no doubt. Snow-capped mountains, crystal clear lakes, forests stretching as far as the eye can see. But there was something about it. Something off. I know how that sounds. Like I'm trying to spook you before I even get to the good part. But I need you to understand, I'm not writing this for entertainment. I'm writing this because I need someone else to know what happened to us. Because something out there in the mountains was watching us. And I don't think we were ever meant to leave. If you had told me back then that this trip would be the scariest experience of my life, I would have laughed. The truth is, for the first few days, Banff felt like something out of a dream. Our flight landed in Calgary in the late afternoon. The sky is soft, endless blue stretching over miles of open prairie. It took us no time at all to grab the rental car, a rugged SUV that Omar insisted on for the authentic mountain experience, and hit the road. The drive started off flat and golden, the kind of landscape that makes you feel like you're on the edge of something much bigger. Every now and then, we'd pass clusters of horses grazing in the fields, their coats shimmering in the last light of the day. At one point, we slowed down to take in an odd sight, a lone coyote lounging near a herd of horses, as if it belonged there. It wasn't hunting. It wasn't lurking. It was just there, resting in the grass as the horses grazed around it, completely unbothered. Never seen that before, Ryan muttered, eyes fixed on the scene. Maybe he thinks he's a horse, Omar joked. We kept driving, and soon the mountains began to rise in the distance, a jagged wall of stone that seemed to swallow the sky. The closer we got, the more everything changed. The air, the colors, even the way the light hit the landscape. The golden fields gave way to dense forests, rivers twisting through valleys, the world becoming wilder with every mile. Then, just as we rounded a bend, we saw them. A small herd of elk, standing right in the middle of the road. Ryan braked hard, and we all jolted forward in our seats. But the elk? They didn't even flinch. Guess we're not in a rush anymore, I said, watching as one of the bulls turned its massive head toward us. We waited. 5 minutes. 10. They didn't move. Just stood there, their breath visible in the cool air, their ears flicking at unseen sounds in the trees. And it wasn't just their size that struck me. It was the stillness of them, the way they belonged to this place in a way we never could. This is insane, Omar whispered. It feels alive here, Ryan added. Like everything's watching us. I nodded, remembering a different trip we'd taken a few years back. Scotland, where we'd driven for hours through misty, rolling hills, expecting to see something majestic and only ever finding sheep. Just sheep. Miles and miles of them. This is way better than Scotland, I said, snapping a photo. Ryan laughed. Anything's better than Scotland. Eventually, the elk moved on, vanishing into the trees as silently as they'd appeared. We started driving again, deeper into the mountains, watching as the last light of the sun bled into the horizon. The road stretched ahead of us, winding deeper into the mountains. The sky had darkened into that perfect shade of deep blue just before night fully settles in, and the forest around us felt endless. It had been maybe 20 minutes since the elk had finally moved on, and we were still buzzing from the encounter. Imagine living here, Omar said, leaning forward in his seat. Like, waking up every morning and this is just normal. Ryan scoffed. I get nothing done. I'd just be staring out my window all day. I grinned, about to add something, when Ryan suddenly hit the brakes. Another roadblock. Only this one wasn't caused by animals. A Parks Canada ranger stood in the middle of the road, illuminated by the red flashers of his truck. Several other vehicles were pulled off to the side, some with their hazard lights blinking. Whatever was happening, we couldn't see it. The ranger's truck and the parked cars ahead were blocking our view. Ryan slowed to a stop, frowning. What the hell is this? The ranger, a tall guy with a thick jacket and a Parks Canada cap, raised a gloved hand and waved us down. His expression was calm, but there was something in his posture, firm, deliberate. Ryan rolled down the window as the ranger stepped up. Hey folks, the ranger said, his voice steady. Just a quick delay. Stay in your vehicle for now. What's going on? Omar asked. The ranger hesitated, glancing briefly toward whatever was ahead. Just some wildlife activity. He gave us a polite but unreadable nod and then, without another word, turned and climbed back into his truck. Ryan sighed, shifting in his seat. All right, that was vague as hell. We sat there, watching, waiting. A few of the other cars had people inside recording with their phones. Some even had cameras with long lenses poking out their windows. Okay, now I want to know what's going on, I muttered. Ryan reached for the door handle. I'll just ask. Before he could even crack the door open, the Ranger's truck lights flashed, and from inside, he gave a quick but unmistakable stay in your car gesture. Ryan exhaled, letting go of the handle. Guess that answers that. We looked at each other, then back at the other parked cars. The people filming weren't looking at the Ranger, or even at the roadblock itself. Their cameras were pointed toward the tree line. Something was in the woods, and whatever it was worth recording. The tension in the car thickened as we tried to see what everyone else was recording. The Ranger sat still in his truck, watching the trees, his hand resting near his radio. Then the forest shifted, a low rustling, the sound of something big moving through the brush. And then he appeared. A gigantic grizzly bear lumbered out of the trees, his sheer size making every single one of us go silent. He was a beast, easily over 600 pounds, with thick fur that rippled over powerful muscle as he moved. His face was scarred, his shoulders broad, and when he turned his head slightly toward us, I felt my breath catch in my throat. No wonder the Ranger wanted us to stay inside. The bear barely acknowledged the line of vehicles as he plodded forward, staying a safe distance away. Then, with an almost lazy motion, he rose onto his hind legs. Now, I've seen bears in zoos before, but this was different. Standing like that, he was taller than the SUV, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Even the people filming had gone dead silent. It was like being in the presence of something ancient, something that owned this land in a way we never could. And I knew who he was. Holy shit, I whispered. That's the boss. Ryan and Omar glanced at me. The what? Ryan asked, his voice barely above a breath. The boss. He's famous. I saw him in a bunch of Banff videos online. He's the biggest grizzly in the park. They think he's like 20 years old. Omar stared at the bear, who was still sniffing the air, his massive claws hanging in front of his chest. He's huge. Yeah, I nodded. And get this, he survived getting hit by a train. Twice. No way, Ryan muttered. Swear to God, I said. And he's still kicking ass. He's fathered a bunch of cubs, he steals kills from wolves, and he even eats other bears. Jesus Omar Vispirid. What a legend. The boss slowly dropped back down onto all fours with a heavy thud and continued his way across the road, his hulking frame moving with surprising ease. The Ranger still hadn't moved, just watching, waiting. No one spoke. No one dared to move. And then, just as effortlessly as he had arrived, the boss disappeared into the trees on the other side of the road. For a long moment, we all just sat there, processing what we had just seen. Then the Ranger's radio crackled, breaking the silence. A moment later, he opened his door, stepped out, and waved us forward. Ryan let out a breath. Well, he said, gripping the wheel, Banff's already better than Scotland. None of us disagreed. As we drove past, the three of us were still buzzing from what we had just seen. I mean, how many people could say they saw the boss up close like that? The whole thing felt unreal. But as the road cleared and Ryan eased the SUV forward, a new thought crept into my mind. What was he doing in the road for that long? I muttered. Omar shrugged. Just vibing. Ryan nodded. When you're that big, I guess you can do whatever the hell you want. We chuckled, but something about it fell off. A bear like that, a top predator, didn't just hang around like that unless there was a reason. And then we saw it. At the edge of the tree line, just a few feet off the road, were the remains of a much smaller black bear. Half-eaten. The laughter in the car died instantly. No one said a word. We just stared as we slowly rolled past, the shape of the carcass unmistakable even in the fading light. Ribs exposed, fur matted with blood, torn flesh. Ryan reached over and silently pressed the lock button on the doors. Click. Omar did the same on his side. Click. I followed suit. Click. No one acknowledged it. We just kept driving, eyes forward, pretending we had seen nothing. Only once we had put a solid few miles between us, and that scene did Omar finally clear his throat and say, So, anyone else feel like that was some mafia shit? I exhaled. Yup. Ryan nodded. I don't think I ever want to meet a bear that eats other bears. By the time we finally rolled into Banff, the sky had darkened into a deep navy blue, the last hints of sunlight fading behind the jagged peaks. The town itself was like something out of a postcard. Cozy wooden buildings, warm lights glowing from shop windows, and the towering mountains standing like silent guardians in the distance. After checking into our hotel, a rustic little lodge with wood-paneled walls and thick wool blankets, we wasted no time heading out to explore. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and distant campfires. Everything about Banff felt alive, like the land itself had a pulse. We wandered down Banff Avenue, popping in and out of souvenir shops, grabbing small gifts for family and friends back home. Ryan bought his girlfriend a cute little carved bear figurine. Omar picked up a ridiculously overpriced hoodie that he swore was worth every penny, and I grabbed a few postcards, already planning to write something obnoxiously sentimental on them. The locals were just as warm as the town itself. Bartenders, shopkeepers, even random people on the street were happy to chat, throwing out recommendations left and right. If you want a real challenge, a young guy in an outdoor gear shop told us, try scrambling up Mount Rundle. Go canoeing on Vermilion Lakes at sunrise, suggested a woman at a cafe. That's when the water is perfect. But it was an older French-Canadian man, sitting outside a small pub with a pint of beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other, who really caught our attention. You boys look like the adventurous type, he said, his accent thick but smooth. If you want to camp somewhere really special, forget the tourist spots. Go to Elephas Peak. Omar, already buzzing with excitement about this trip, leaned in. Never heard of it. What's up there? The man smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners. Nothing but stars and silence. No clouds, just you and the mountains. Ryan looked skeptical. Isn't it kind of off the beaten path? The man waved a hand dismissively. Not too bad. A bit of a hike, but worth it. And if you need a tent, I have an extra. We exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of experience we were looking for. Something real. Something raw. Omar grinned. I'm in. I hesitated for half a second, but the excitement was contagious. All right, let's do it. Ryan exhaled. Fine. But if we die, I'm haunting you both. The old man chuckled. Bon courage, mes amis. We clinked our beers together, already imagining the adventure ahead. At that moment, Banff still felt magical. We had no idea what was waiting for us in the mountains. The next morning, we wasted no time getting ready for our camping trip. After a solid breakfast at a local diner, we hit the outdoor supply shops, picking up food, extra layers, and a canister of bear spray for good measure. The old French guy who had suggested Elephas Peak met us outside our hotel, true to his word, and handed over his spare tent with a knowing smile. Be careful up there, he said as we loaded our gear into the SUV. We will, Omar promised, practically bouncing with excitement. By noon, we had everything prepped for the following day. With a few hours to kill, we decided to split up and explore Banff on our own. Omar wanted to check out the hot springs. Ryan went off in search of a local brewery, and I, ever the wildlife nerd, made my way to the Banff Park Museum. The place was small but packed with history, its walls lined with glass cases of taxidermy animals. Grizzlies, bison, wolverines, an entire frozen snapshot of the wild, preserved up close. I wandered the aisles, taking my time, stopping in front of a lynx display. The thing was beautiful, its fur thick, its massive paws built for silent movement in deep snow. Rare to see one in the wild, came a voice beside me. I turned to see a Parks Canada ranger standing nearby. He was older, maybe mid-50s, with long, graying black hair tied back and a uniform that looked well worn. Yeah, I said, nodding. I read they avoid people. He gave a small smile. Smart animals. They know what places to stay away from. I wasn't sure why, but something about the way he said it made me pause. We started chatting, and I quickly realized he was native, likely from one of the First Nations in the area. He had a quiet, steady way of speaking, like someone who had spent a lifetime observing the land rather than talking about it. We talked about lynx, their hunting patterns, their near invisibility in the snow. It was a good conversation until I mentioned Elephas Peak. The moment the words left my mouth, his expression shifted. Not dramatic, just off. His polite interest faded, his posture stiffened slightly. And for the first time since we started talking, he broke eye contact. "Where did you say you were going?" he asked. "Elephas Peak," I repeated, suddenly feeling unsure. "We're camping there tomorrow." He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the link's display, but he wasn't looking at it. His jaw tightened, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was lower, quieter. "Bad idea." That was it. No explanation. Just those two words. I blinked. "What?" His eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time, there was something heavy in them. A weight I couldn't place. "Dangerous wildlife," he said simply. That should have been a normal response. Banff was full of predators. Bears, cougars, wolves. But something about the way he said it sent a chill up my spine. I swallowed. "What kind of wildlife?" He didn't answer right away. Then, just as I was about to ask again, he gave a tight nod and said, "Have a safe trip." And just like that, the conversation was over. I watched as he turned and walked toward the museum entrance, disappearing through a side door. Something about the whole exchange left me uneasy. I told myself he was just being cautious. Maybe he'd had a deal with one too many clueless tourists who thought they could waltz into the backcountry without knowing the risks. But as I stood there, staring at the lynx's frozen, glassy gaze, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something. Something he didn't want to say out loud. I didn't mention the conversation with the ranger to Ryan or Omar. Maybe I should have. But at the time, I chalked it up to nothing more than an old-timer being overly cautious. After all, if Elephas Peak was really dangerous, surely more people would have warned us, right? So I shook it off. And the next morning, we packed up our gear, stuffed the borrowed tent into the SUV, and headed out. The first stretch of the trip was smooth, the paved roads winding through towering evergreens, the air crisp and fresh. The whole morning had a golden glow to it, the sunlight bouncing off the peaks, making everything look too perfect. We were about 20 minutes outside Banff when we saw it. At first, it was just a blur of movement at the side of the road. Something dark. Fast. Then, as we got closer, we realized what we were looking at. A black wolf. It was massive, larger than I thought wolves could get. Its jet black fur sleek and rippling with muscle. But what really made us go silent was what was trapped in its jaws. A full-grown bighorn ram. The wolf had it by the throat, the ram's body limp, eyes wide with the glassy stillness of death. Ryan slowed the SUV to a crawl as we passed, all three of us watching in stunned silence. The wolf barely acknowledged us, its yellow eyes flicking up for half a second before it turned and disappeared into the trees, dragging the ram's body with it like it weighed nothing. Omar let out a long breath. Jesus, that thing was huge. Ryan exhaled sharply, gripping the wheel. Did you see how easily it carried that thing? Rams weigh like, 200 pounds? At least, I muttered. For a moment, none of us spoke. The image of that wolf, the way it looked at us like it knew something, stuck in my head. Then Omar clapped his hands together. All right, let's move on before it decides we look tasty. Ryan shook his head, chuckling. Yeah, back to the wilderness we go. And just like that, we put the black wolf behind us. The rest of the drive was uneventful. The roads gradually got rougher, shifting from pavement to gravel, then to dirt as we climbed higher into the mountains. The tree line grew thinner, and by the time we reached the base of Elephas Peak, the world felt different, quieter, not the peaceful kind of quiet, the other kind. I told myself it was just the isolation, but deep down I knew it was something else. By the time we reached the clearing near the base of Elephas Peak, the sun was starting to dip behind the mountains. The campsite was nothing special, just a relatively flat patch of land tucked between clusters of tall pines, with a small fire pit made of scattered stones for past campers. No official signs, no marked trails, just raw wilderness. We set up without issue, pitching the old French guy's tent and rolling out our sleeping bags. Omar, ever the self-proclaimed survival expert, took charge of gathering firewood while Ryan and I unpacked our food. By the time the fire was crackling, we were all in good spirits, sitting around with beers in hand and talking about everything and nothing. It felt good. The crisp mountain air, the occasional breeze rustling through the trees. It was exactly the kind of trip Omar had envisioned. No loud bars, no overpriced clubs. Just us halfway across the world, soaking in nature. Then, as we sat in comfortable silence, staring into the flames, we heard something. At first, I couldn't even process what I was hearing. It started like an elk bugle, that high-pitched, eerie whistling sound that echoed across the valley. But then, halfway through, it shifted. The tone cracked and warped, turning into something that sounded more like a coyote's howl. And then, a man's scream. Not a distant, vague cry. Not the kind of noise you could write off as imagination. It was sharp, human, and filled with pain. The three of us snapped our heads up at the same time. No one moved. No one spoke. We just listened as the sound stretched out, bouncing off the surrounding cliffs. It was impossible to tell where it was coming from. Could have been miles away. Could have been closer. Then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. We sat frozen, waiting, half expecting to hear it again. Nothing. Omar was the first to break. The hell was that? Ryan shook his head, his face pale in the firelight. An elk, maybe? I swallowed. Elk don't sound like that. We stared at each other for a long moment. The fire popped. The trees swayed. Eventually, Omar forced a chuckle. Probably just an animal that got spooked or something. It's the wild, man. Weird sounds happen. Ryan exhaled and nodded. Yeah, true. I wanted to agree. I really did. But something about the way the sound changed, from an animal's call to something so unmistakably human, had left a pit in my stomach. We stayed up a little longer, half joking, half jittery, before eventually crawling into the tent. I told myself it was nothing, but as I lay there in the dark, staring at the nylon ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something out there had seen us first. And that sound? It wasn't just an animal. It was a warning. The night descended slowly, the air cooling quickly as the sun sank behind the jagged peaks. The three of us huddled inside the borrowed tent, laughing off the strange noise we'd heard earlier. We convinced ourselves it had been some combination of elk and coyote. Nature was unpredictable. We were just guessing its realm. All right. Omar grinned as he lay down in the middle of the tent. No more talk of weird animal calls, okay? Let's just enjoy the damn trip. Ryan, already half zoned out, let out a sleepy grunt of agreement. I, on the other hand, couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. But it was late, and fatigue had started to take hold. I rolled over in my sleeping bag, trying to push the uneasy thoughts aside. The fire had burned down to embers, and the world outside seemed still. Before I knew it, we were all asleep. The rhythmic sound of the wind rustling the trees and the soft crackle of a distant creek played in the background, lulling us into a false sense of security. But then, snuffling. It started quietly like a wet, sniffing sound coming from just outside the tent. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. The kind of primal fear that takes over when you know you're not alone. The snuffling continued, like something was pushing its nose against the fabric, sniffing us out. It sounded close, too close. My mind screamed bare. Ryan stirred beside me. What the hell? I didn't answer. I was already reaching for the bear spray. The snuffling grew louder. It sounded like it was circling us, moving around the tent, testing the boundaries of the small space we'd made for ourselves. The deep, rasping breath of something big, something dangerous. My fingers found the canister of bear spray, the metal cold in my hands. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, my breath shallow and quick. I clicked the safety off, the sound sharp in the quiet night. Click. The snuffling stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of our breathing, the quiet hum of wind through the trees. The air felt too thick, too still. My grip tightened around the bear spray. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, my pulse racing in time with my thoughts. Don't move, I whispered. No one moved. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Then, in the distance, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the valley. A flash of lightning lit up the sky, briefly illuminating the exterior of the tent in a stark white light. For just a moment, I saw the dark silhouette of something moving outside. Great, I thought, my grip tightening on the bear spray. Now a storm's coming too. The wind picked up, but it wasn't enough to drown out the sound of the shifting outside. The rustle of fabric, the soft scraping of something long and thin dragging against the ground. Every movement outside was deliberate, slow, as if whatever was out there was testing the air, figuring out how to approach us. Another flash of lightning split the sky, and in that brief instant, I saw it. Not a bear, not a coyote. I froze, my stomach twisting in a way I can't even explain. It was a humanoid shape, tall and thin, far too thin. The silhouette was barely discernible at first, but the lightning illuminated it just enough to make my blood run cold. The figure was in the process of standing up, its body unnaturally elongated, as if it had been crouching low to the ground just moments before. I blinked, thinking it was just a trick of the light. But when the flash of lightning struck again, it revealed more. Long arms, disproportionately long, almost like it had been stretched, a grotesque parody of a human figure. The arms hung too low, swaying with the wind in unnatural ways, each one twitching slightly, as if the creature was adjusting its posture. And the head, thin, too thin, with long tendrils of hair swaying slightly in the breeze. It almost looked like they were moving independently, separate from the head itself, curling like something alive. I could feel my heart in my throat. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. It was like I was staring at something that shouldn't exist, a creature pulled from some fever dream. Ryan's breath hitched beside me. Omar shifted, but I could hear his breath quicken too. None of us said anything. We couldn't. Our mouths were dry, our eyes locked on the figure outside, frozen in place. I couldn't tell how much time passed. My thoughts were scattered, my mind struggling to process what I'd just seen. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't something that belonged in the wilds of Banff. Not something that should have been anywhere near our campsite. We lay there as still as we could manage, hoping, praying, that whatever that creature was would stay out there in the shadows. But deep down we all knew it wasn't done with us. The thunder cracked above us, louder than ever, as if the sky itself was splitting apart. But the storm wasn't what made my heart hammer in my chest. It was what came next. The roar. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't anything remotely natural. It was something far worse. A chimeric wail, part animal, part something unrecognizably other. It tore through the night, joining the cacophony of thunder and wind. My body went cold, paralyzed in a state of pure terror. I could feel the vibrations of the sound in my bones, a deep, raw rage that sent shockwaves through the air. And then, almost as if the creature's roar had activated something deep within me, I acted without thinking. Before I even realized what I was doing, I had unzipped the tent flap. I could hear Omar shout something, but his voice was drowned out by the overwhelming roar. I didn't care. I didn't even stop to think, my fingers trembling as I fumbled for the nozzle. I aimed it at the spot just beyond the tent, where the creature had crouched earlier. I squeezed. The spray hissed in the air, and for a moment, I felt like I was moving in slow motion. The thick mist of bear mace shot into the night, spraying directly into the creature's face. There was a horrible sound, a guttural, agonizing wail that pierced through the roar of thunder. The creature recoiled, its long arms flailing as it stumbled backward. It shrieked, its hands clutching at its eyes, as if the very air was burning its flesh. The sound was deafening. The sheer pain in that wail, a wail that should never have come from anything living, sent chills through my spine. My brain was screaming, but my body was moving before I could catch up. I heard Ryan yell, "Go, go, go," and the sound of him scrambling, running toward the car. Omar was already on his feet, pulling me with him as we dashed to the SUV, hearts pounding in our chests. Everything after that felt like a blur. The tent was left behind, the cold, wet air hitting my face as I bolted toward the car. My mind couldn't process what we were seeing. The scene unfolding before us was too much, too impossible to understand. As we neared the vehicle, I dared to glance back, my mind trying desperately to force some sense of reality into the nightmare we were witnessing. The creature was still there, writhing in pain. Its long, gangly form was twisting, thrashing, but it was clear that the mace had caused it unimaginable distress. It barely resembled anything human anymore, its proportions even more distorted in the chaos of its agony. But even through the haze of panic, we saw something that made our stomachs drop further. There were more. In the darkness, just at the edge of our vision, other shapes were moving, barely perceptible, but unmistakably there. The long, thin silhouettes of more of those creatures, dozens of them, twitching, swaying, almost like they were emerging from the shadows themselves. But my mind couldn't register it. I couldn't. Ryan yanked open the SUV's door, and we all scrambled in, my heart a racing blur of panic. As I slammed the door shut, I could see the creature from the tent, now stumbling away, still clutching its burning face. It turned, stumbling into the darkness, its form disappearing into the trees. The engine roared to life, and Ryan slammed the pedal down. I don't remember much after the crash. The world spun like a chaotic blur of glass and metal. The screams of my friends barely audible over the deafening roar of the creature's screech. It was a sound that seemed to reverberate in my chest, rattling my bones, and I knew we weren't going to make it. The thing had charged out of the woods, straight at us, too fast for any of us to react in time. It came from nowhere, like a phantom from a nightmare, and I could only watch in frozen horror as it covered the distance between us in an instant. It was monstrous. The headlights illuminated it just long enough for us to make out its full form. A rail-thin humanoid creature, its long arms reaching out toward the car, its face twisted in a grotesque snarl. It was impossibly tall, its body unnaturally elongated, with thin tendrils of hair swaying in the wind like the reeds of swamp. Its eyes, glowing, predatory, locked onto us in the car as it surged toward us, and all I could think was, we're going to die. Ryan screamed, his hands yanking the steering wheel as he tried to swerve, but the thing wasn't having it. With a roar that shook the car, it slammed into the side of our vehicle, a collision that felt like the earth itself had buckled beneath us. The metal of the car groaned under its weight, and in a single, violent motion, it tossed us off the road. The car spun uncontrollably, tumbling through the air as trees and rocks blurred past the windows. It was as if time had slowed. I remember seeing Ryan's panicked face, his hand gripping the wheel as he tried to correct the car, but it was too late. The world flipped upside down, and I could taste the cold air as we plummeted toward the ground. The last thing I saw before everything went black was that thing. The creature, standing there, watching, waiting as our car rolled and crashed into a tree with a sickening thud. Then darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed days later. The light was harsh and white above me, making everything feel distant, like I was still floating in some kind of dream. My body was sore, every muscle aching from the crash, and I could barely make sense of where I was. My hands shook as I reached up to touch my face, feeling the cuts and bruises that had formed from the impact. I was alive, but barely. Ryan was sitting next to the bed, his eyes tired but relieved when he saw I was awake. "Josh," he said, his voice hoarse. "You're awake. Good to see you, man." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, like I hadn't drunk anything in hours. I croaked, "What happened? Where's Omar?" Ryan sighed, looking down for a moment before meeting my eyes. "He's fine. Both of us are fine. But you took the worst of it. The crash. It was bad. We barely got out of there in time." I swallowed, piecing together fragments of the events that led up to this point. The creature. What happened to it? Ryan hesitated. His gaze faltered. Then he finally spoke. It didn't get us. But almost did. Almost. I frowned, confused. "What do you mean, almost?" "It hit us. It almost killed us." Ryan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face as if he was still processing everything. "After the crash, we couldn't get the car started. We could still hear that thing, Josh. It was out there in the woods, screeching. That noise was, I don't know. It wouldn't stop. But then, out of nowhere, this guy, remember the native guy from the museum? He said he met you there. He showed up, came out of the woods with his family." I blinked. "Wait, what? The guy at the museum? He came for us." Ryan nodded, his voice low. "Yeah, he came with a few people. I don't know how they found us so fast, but they did. And they helped us. More importantly, they helped us get rid of it, and the rest of those things. Get rid of it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Ow." Ryan exhaled, eyes narrowing. "They fought them. I don't know how they did it, but they had some kind of ritual. The guy spoke in a language I didn't understand. And when the creature screamed again, it just stopped, backed off, disappeared into the woods. I felt a shiver run down my spine. They just left. Yeah, just like that. It was like the guy knew exactly how to make it go away. After that, they made sure we were okay and stayed with us until help arrived. I stared at him in disbelief, trying to make sense of it all. Ultimately, I just lay down and chose to just be thankful to be alive. The rest of our trip was a blur. We tried to carry on like everything was fine, but the unease never left us. Every night, we half expected that creature to come back, but nothing ever did. We made it through the rest of our time in Banff, sightseeing, but it felt like we were walking in the shadow of something we couldn't fully comprehend. Then, 2 weeks later, we were on our way out of Banff. The drive was quiet. I try not to look back, but as we approached the edge of town, I saw him. The Frenchman. He was standing at the edge of town, staring at us as we drove past. His expression was hard to read, but I could see it. He wasn't just looking at us. He was watching, and the frustration on his face was unmistakable. I don't know why, but the sight of him made my stomach turn. I glanced at Ryan and Omar, but neither of them noticed. They were too busy chatting, completely oblivious. I didn't look back after that. I didn't need to. Something told me we'd never fully understand what had happened in those mountains. That creature, the warnings, the Frenchman's strange look, all of it was part of something larger, something we weren't meant to understand. But as we drove out of Banff, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't seen the last of it. That whatever had been watching us, whatever had been waiting, was still out there. And I couldn't help but wonder what else could be out there in the world. That's it for today's creepy Reddit tales. Before we go, I just want to say a quick thanks to all of you for watching, liking, and sticking around. You guys keep this channel going, and I'll be back soon with more stories that'll make your skin crawl. Drop a comment if you've got your own spooky tale to share, and I'll see you in the next one.